Welcome to Unplug the Connection series. Today we will be talking about distractions versus priorities. I am Isaiah.
I am Amy.
I'm Cleopatra.
And I'm Caitlin.
Okay. Who wants to kick it off? Distractions versus priorities.
Well, I think we can define, maybe start off with defining distractions versus priorities would be a good place to start. Like distractions, they'll pull you away from your purpose, but priorities actually point you towards your purpose. And so I think we can ask ourselves, whatever I'm doing, is this drawing me closer to what God has called me to do, or is it drawing me farther away from what He's called me to do?
And I think that some distractions are going to look different for everybody, just depending on what you're working on, what your purpose, I guess you could say, is. And that's the same thing. Your priorities are going to look different because you're going to be working on different projects or whatever it may be. But we can all agree that there are distractions that I feel like are universal to all of us. And it kind of just depends if we allow those distractions to actually be a distraction, or if we have the discipline to, I don't know if set them aside is necessarily the right word, but if we have the discipline to just not engage in them and focus instead on our priorities. So I think it's, I guess you could say, kind of a matter of the first thing you would do is kind of maybe make a list or something of like what you know you should prioritize or what you need to prioritize. And even what you are prioritizing, what you need to, and see like if you're correct, like if you're actually prioritizing the things that matter or the things you really need to do. And then also make a list of the distractions that you know you specifically, kind of like the ones that undermine your focus or undermine your priorities. And so then if you put them on paper or even a whiteboard or whatever works for you, then you can like see them, and it helps you to then evaluate and see where you're supposed to go from there.
It's a great idea. I'm thinking I should do that. Hang those distractions up so I can see what I'm not supposed to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
That's a brilliant idea.
Well, and I would say, yeah, because like distraction and temptation, I feel like kind of go hand in hand, because a lot of distractions, I mean, it's technically a temptation. So it's honestly, like you said, Cleo, it's not necessarily getting rid of the distraction. In some cases it is. Like if you are trying to stay, be on your phone less, just put it in a drawer somewhere and get it, out of sight, out of mind. But in some cases, the distraction is not going to remove itself from the situation, and you can't really remove it either. You just have to, I guess, abstain from it and build the discipline over time, because everyone has the discipline in them. You just have to channel it and use it.
Build the muscle, kind of like anything else. You have to build the discipline muscle. Build the discipline muscle against your distractions.
Well, and I would say also, if we look at what brings more order versus what brings more disorder, or what brings more flow, or what is more lack of flow, we can look at it that way, because what's going to flow better, but what's also going to bring more order and more peace and calm and harmony versus, the interruptions, the interference, the commotion, the disorder. It affects our mental and physical health. It affects our family, our relationships, our work, everything, our sleep, eating, all of it. And so it's like a bad, like a chemical that's sent through our body, that it's like, oh man, we know we shouldn't be doing it. Like Isaiah said, it is literally a temptation, some worse than others.
One, I think the title of the book is The 12 Rules for Life. It's by Jordan Peterson. And he's talking about the difference between order and chaos. He's like, that's the two that you have to have. And you'd have to kind of just like read parts of it because I'm not going to summarize the entire thing, but he's like, you have to have the right amount of both because you can't have necessarily none of each. You have to have the what moves you forward, which would be the right amount, a healthy amount of chaos. It sounds wrong, but when you read the context, it makes sense. But then you have to have the order. That's things get better. That's how you improve that. You know what I mean? And so he talks about order and chaos. And when you were saying chaos and confusion, it kind of made me think of that. But you have to choose also between the order and chaos to decide which one is going to run your life or have the upper hand in your life. Is it going to be chaos or is it going to be order? And that's kind of a choice that, you know, you make every day, but also every moment too. You can kind of look at it also as, am I choosing God's way or am I choosing my chaotic way, you know? And so when we're following God's way, then it's going to be an orderly, more defined path, a safer path, versus when we're choosing our way, it's going to be more chaotic because we don't have a foundation to root our choices in. And so that's kind of maybe another way to look at it. Just even when you're making your decisions, ask yourself, is this a chaotic choice, a selfish choice, or is this an orderly, godly choice that I'm making?
And I think too, like asking yourself, like when it comes to identifying like your true priorities and figuring those out, ask yourself what matters in light of eternity, or what matters, what has God clearly placed on your heart to steward well, whether it's your faith, your relationships, your calling, you know, the people that God's placed in your life, and write those down. Because if it's not on your priority list, it might be a distraction. So I think that's a good way to identifying, okay, what are these distractions that maybe drain my time and energy and focus, and what do I need to prioritize in order for growth, meaningful growth?
Even maybe take it a step further once you've made the list, like go through the distractions and try to come up with how they're enriching your life. And I think it's probably going to be difficult because the point is that it is a distraction, but it's going to make you maybe understand a little bit better why it's a distraction, you know, because if you have that knowledge of why it's not benefiting you, why it's not moving you forward, why it's not lending to your priorities, then I think that it just kind of cements it in your mind as that distraction, because it's easy to make excuses. And we have a video in our mental attire series about excuses versus execution. I think that's what it's called. That I would invite you to watch for a little bit more on that. But I think that just would make it harder to make those excuses if you have that list to go to, and then if you take it that step further and have how it's taking you away from your priorities, taking you away from your calling, it's going to be like, well, and this is a deliberate choice to not kind of follow your purpose, or, you know, pursue your purpose. So yeah.
And I would suggest doing that for different areas of our lives, the distractions and priorities, because we have, like with God, our mental and physical health, our family, business, you know, on down the list. And I would invite that when we look at those, to look at them like, okay, are there consequences, or is this benefiting everyone? You know, because like Jordan Peterson, I think what he was basically saying with the chaos is, okay, this may distract temporarily, but in the long term, it's actually a benefit. And then those are the causing chaos, that there's consequences that we really don't want. You know, if we're not taking care of our health, then right now this distraction, it is going to be having consequences, and the benefits are not benefiting me or anyone else. And so benefits, consequences, looking at that, because if there's temporary distraction that, okay, this is going to temporarily take a higher priority, basically it'll jump to the priority list. or it's a distraction that, okay, I can do this for a little bit. It's going to be okay because there will be benefits that far outweigh the consequences.
Well,
How
and it
about
might,
what are some go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like you were saying, temporarily, this distraction that might be in the long run, like you wouldn't do it long term, but right now because you're doing something specific. Maybe I'll just make up a scenario. Maybe you're working on launching like a new product or something, and so typically you wouldn't be working on it at 9 p.m., but you have something that you need to do. That could be considered a distraction if it became a regular occurrence. But if it's something that is beneficial and going to help with your purpose, then that can be, a temporary priority almost. So like maybe it would be, maybe you could have a list of temporary priorities that could be a running list of like when you're working on projects like that or whatever it might be. Just to have that so you can keep track of it too, just so then you're aware of it, because when you become aware of it, it becomes harder to ignore either the distractions or the priorities. It could go good or bad, really.
And look at the patterns and the habits, because that's what, if we need to change habits, and we have different videos that, even James Cleary, the Atomic Habit, he mentions a lot of things, and we talk about it throughout our series. But what are some distractions for each of you that are not priorities?
Well, I mean, I feel like there's one. I have a list over here. No, I'm kidding. But there's one I feel like fairly universal distraction these days. It's kind of a large elephant in the room. Technology, of course, especially like this thing right here. But what was I gonna say? I was gonna get into some stats quick as far as technology, and most sources have confirmed a continued decline in the average attention span, which has gone down to as low as 8 seconds. Especially like taking care of tasks on technology, because you jump from app to app so quickly. And I think it was like 2004, it was 2.5 minutes. So clearly a steady decline there. And I mean, we all know technology has not helped, of course, with, the autoplay videos and everything. So I feel like technology it's such a kicker for a lot of us that we're overcoming it, of course, especially if you choose to acknowledge it and say, hey, there's a problem here. We need to go the other way, So I feel like that's a pretty large one.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's almost become, and I don't want to say that there's not other distractions, but I think it's almost become the main distraction, so that we don't even have any, I don't want to say healthier distractions, because I'm not trying to frame them as healthier, but you don't have, like, you're not just going and picking up a book in the middle of working or doing something like that, which doesn't necessarily make it a healthy distraction, but it's because technology has such a stronghold on us, and it, like we've discussed in our other videos, it can be used for good. It's not all bad. But when it's the distraction and when it's not being used for beneficial purposes or for even God's purposes, then it becomes a major distraction. I would say probably the top distraction that most of us could name. And so when I try to think of other distractions outside of technology, it's like, it's harder. I think that it would be possible if you were sitting down with a paper, because you're actually focusing on that. But off the top of my head, it's crazy how hard it is to come up with like other distractions. And then I'll let Caitlin go, and then I'll say what I was going to say.
Well, I mean, honestly, that's the first thing that goes to my mind is technology, our screens, our phones. Like that is the top distraction. And I feel like it is like a universal, hey, if you're going to ask somebody that on the street, that's what they're going to tell you if they're being honest with themselves. It is, because you've constantly too got those notifications that are just, they're coming in. And so if you're sitting there at work and if you don't have your phone put away, if you don't have that boundary set, okay, you see those notifications and it pulls you from your work or whatever you're doing. It pulls you from your family time. And that's what my mind goes to. That is probably my top distraction. And I'd say a lot of people's.
What
They
I was gonna
say,
say,
go ahead. Go ahead.
what I was gonna say is that like I've found that also I'm more prone to distractions or wanting to distract myself when either a project isn't going well or it doesn't feel like it has clarity, and so you're kind of like searching for something to fill that void because you don't feel productive or you don't feel like you have clarity on whatever it might be that you're working on. And in my case right now, I'm talking about like when I'm writing. And when you pay attention to those patterns, like Mom was saying, you kind of learn of like, okay, maybe this means I need to reevaluate. Maybe I need to change something. Um, maybe there's a part of it that's not right, or I need to, whatever it might be. But it's a pattern just like I've recognized personally is that you reach for those distractions even more when you're not as fully invested in what you're doing. And the other side of that is that once you start eliminating those distractions though, you will become more invested in, whatever you're actually working on. And so it can be kind of it can have two sides to it, because if you're too distracted and that's your main, I don't want to say focus because really it's not a focus, then it pulls you out of your work or whatever it is, your family, whatever, it's not just about work. But then on the flip side, if you're purposely, you're reaching for those distractions because you almost don't want to be fully present because it's not going well, then you have to also assess that too and see what changes you need to make or why that's happening.
I think, I think the average they say is 23 minutes. Like you glance at your phone for a second, just to whatever, and it takes a good 23 minutes before you will get back on task and be more present. And I think the range is actually from like 17 to 51 minutes, or maybe even over an hour now. And you think about it, just 23 minutes is like almost a half an hour. That's one half of an hour. Think about how many hours we have in the day. And think about that chunk of time that just took that distraction. And it's like, oh my goodness, that's serious. And you see any of us, wherever we're at, and you see workers everywhere you are checking their phones constantly, and it's like, okay, you picture a good half an hour before they're actually going to be present. They may go through some tasks or this or that, or I may go through and do some things, but I'm totally off. I've gotten off the beaten path. And all it takes is one thought. Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm going to check this. Here we go down the rabbit hole.
It's true.
Like that kind of. Sorry, go ahead, Kayla.
No. I was just saying that. You're good.
Like into the workplace, I guess. Like talking about that realm, like 70 to 80% of workers get distracted on a typical workday, which is crazy because back, let's say 50 years ago, of course there were distractions, but when you have a phone sitting right there, it's so easily distractible. And how many times we pick up our phone, like you said, Caitlin, if you don't set it aside and actually set that boundary, then it's just, you're malleable. You're gonna get distracted easily. And if you pick up your phone once just to look at one or two notifications, that'll last for at least 23 minutes, and then another notification comes in, and honestly, you're gonna be constantly distracted. So it's like, okay, you got to draw the line. And I feel like working from home has not helped because there's not someone keeping an eye on everyone, and it's so much more, it's closer to your fingertips, and especially like having a TV in the other room or something, or even the same room. And I feel like it's just gotten so.
But back in 1992, when I worked at a university for the college for their staff, we had like 300 and some people, right? We had to take care of their computers. And you know what the issue was back then? Games on their desktops. We had to go around and eliminate the games off of their desktops. It was just games at that time. They didn't have the cell phones that were going crazy. They didn't have the internet yet. They didn't have social media. None of it. And it drove us crazy because we were busy doing that. I can't imagine now. You can't do, I mean, it comes down to us humans changing our habits and our patterns, because it is like we went crazy trying to just keep up with that. And that was just for a lap or for a desktop. That didn't include laptops. That didn't include, there were no cell phones that we were contending with. But I think our big message is do prioritize. You'll feel a lot better. Your life will go a lot better. Your health, your mental and physical health, and you'll sleep better, and you'll eat, and you'll just overall your productivity level will be better. Your relationships will be better. So that's all the reasons to do it.
Well, those boundaries protect what matters most. And so it's really important to set those boundaries. And even I go back to scripture, it says, but seek first the kingdom of God. So what are we seeking? Jesus modeled even priorities by saying that. And so it's important for us to have those priorities and apply them to our lives. So we can have that list, but it's important to apply it after we make that list.
And we have a video quiet time under our mental attire that, Jesus would go off and he'd get quiet. He'd get away from the noise, which we recorded. You can look on our series here, Turn Off the Noise, and you can check out our quiet time. And we actually talk about this a lot, of just turning off the noise and just connect, or go out in nature and connect, or just sit and do some breathing, just quiet yourself. And as we talk about regularly, be that first kernel of popcorn. If people aren't around you, it is hard. I have some habits right now I want to change, and it's like, you get that FOMO, fear of missing out. What am I going to miss out if I don't look at this? What if I don't know about this? That can just take us down, the FOMO, So what do y'all have for one takeaway today for everyone?
Really quick, I don't want to interrupt you, but I have one thing to say before takeaways. Is
That's
that
fine.
with as far as talking to unplug, let's say you get at 5 p.m. you get done working, even just working from home, you shut your laptop. Okay, I'm done working for the day. Well, I feel like it's so normalized that we go from the laptop, and for a downtime, we go to TV and phone. So you go from your desk on your laptop staring at blue light, and you go sit on the couch staring at your phone, scrolling, and turn a movie on or show. I feel like it's so that's not downtime, people. I've caught myself doing this lately. I've been reading more, but it's so easy to do, because you think, well, I need to see what's the latest and greatest, because I've been staring at a different screen. So I just wanted to put that out there, because
that's a very good point. And one other thing, maybe, we've mentioned some things, but what are priorities? We talked about distractions. How about we just really briefly, we've mentioned it, each of you, but name off some priorities that people need to highly consider first and foremost.
And I think that, I guess my mind first goes to categories of the priorities, and then you could build them out from there, really. But I would say faith, your health, both physical and mental, your family, and then it can go on down the list, but again, it goes broadly from there of work, or whatever you're responsible for in your life. But I feel like that's kind of the list in that order. And then again, you can break it out from there, whether you have specific roles, or within your family, this is what my priorities are. You can have priorities under the main priorities, I guess is what I'm saying. But I feel like for me, and it's not to say that I always prioritize them well, But I would say those are the categories that first came to mind when you asked the question.
And I think ask yourself what matters in light of, building for God's kingdom, in light of eternity. What matters in my life? Okay, does the phone matter more than, my quiet time? Does the phone matter more than time with family? And I think that would be one thing I would ask myself if you're trying to figure out your priorities. Ask what matters most in light of, building for God's kingdom or fulfilling his purposes for my life.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, of course, as far as priorities, let's say everyday life, it's different for every person. But also just kind of go back to, like, I literally had what I was going to say. Just go back to like, oh my gosh, I had it all planned out in my head. Just the basics, I guess. A good, clean life, just read the word, quiet time, book. Like, I feel like there's also a detox, like when you're so distracted so much, so frequently, there's going to be a detox of like working yourself off of that. It depends on what the distractions are, but just like work on the basics.
And I would say, like, look at your mental and physical health. What are you putting before that? Like, how about taking a walk? How about doing a few stretches? How about yoga? How about movement? How about breathing? Moving your body somehow, some form, every so often. If you need to set a timer or make a little note to remind yourself. Drinking some water, hydration. So let's really quickly, before takeaways, I'll start. One habit that we each need to change from a distraction, or change a distraction and look at the priorities. One for me right now is all that's going on in our nation. Due to what's went on over the last week, I find myself checking my phone more often, the news and the media, and then at the end of the day, I kick myself. I go to bed and go, every time I did that, that was a distraction away from it. It'll still be there at the end of the day, or if I take a break, fine. This is break time. But I tried yesterday, I did pretty good, and then I went down the rabbit hole. And so now today I wake up and you keep going. Okay, I'm going to do better at my habit today. I'm going to set aside the distractions and ask myself, okay, me checking this right now, is this really going to help me in what my priorities are right this moment? Is it going to change my life right now if I know what's going on with, situations in the nation and everything that's going on? And more than likely, it's not going to be a yes, because it'll still be there and I don't need to know this stuff right now. It's more a vice than a virtue. And so for me, that's my vulnerable, what I need, I'm open with. So anybody else?
Well, that could technically be one of mine. I mean, one of many, right? Which I've been attempting to work on. But I feel like you said, Mom, it's so easy, because when something like this goes on, you want to know the facts, you want to know what's going on, you want to be informed. So I just wanted to say that, of course, I'm working on that. But also for me, something I've been working on for a while is checking email less, because I'm to the point, like, I don't have notifications on my phone for email, but since I don't have notifications on, I find myself checking the app more. Like, okay, I gotta, make sure there's no emails to respond to, blah, blah, blah. And it's become a vice, because I find myself, especially because it's on my phone, my laptop, I'm at my desk at certain times of the day. I'm not sitting here for 8 hours, thankfully. But since it's on my phone, I know where the app's at. I can go in there and check. And even though it just takes a few seconds, whatever task I'm doing, or even if I'm just, sitting on the couch reading, I'm like, oh, well, I'll check email. There goes my distraction, my focus, and there's nothing there, And even though I know that there's no emails in the inbox currently, you just keep checking it. So I think that's kind of where I'm at with that. just working on setting times throughout the day. Like you don't have to check it like every single, like 15 minutes or whatever. Because if emails come in, they'll still be there.
That's
You
what
can
you have
respond to
us
them.
for. We let you know if there's prioritized emails.
Hmm.
And honestly, anything that I've ever studied with the ones who've been very successful with email is, unless it is a person's job, which like we take care of the emails and that kind of stuff coming in and we check them in for the guys or whatever, they honestly say it is best to only set aside time to check those. But it's a habit, and we can change
Hmm.
those habits, you know?
Hmm.
I'm trying to think of like something specific. I mean, I think I can say the same thing as what you guys mentioned. And like we've talked about, it's important to be informed, but it doesn't mean that it needs to be every single moment of every single day, which that could be a different topic, I feel like. I feel like for me, I guess it's more, I guess you could say reaching for my phone less, just as a general thing that I'm not specifically choosing this week, just in general. But then also, I think almost working more on my priorities of what should I be doing, I don't know if I want to say what should I be doing. What would be the most beneficial for me to be doing right now, whether it's with my writing or with mindset merch, and trying to prioritize those tasks, tasks, I guess is the best word. But becoming more aware of those, and then I guess as distractions come up, kind of trying to counter those with a priority or whatever you would say. But off the top of my head, I've been trying to sit here and think of something other than like reaching for my phone, and I can't name another like big distraction that comes to mind, I guess. I guess you could get distracted by just wandering around, but maybe that would be better than picking up your phone. So
I think it would. I think just walk around a little bit. It'd be better.
Yeah.
And if we look at go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say one thing that I've been trying to do, and I can say that I haven't done it perfectly by any means, but just getting up and taking just a couple of minutes of a break, either going outside for a couple minutes or just actually walking around. I've done that too. And just trying to focus more on what actually matters and what God's wanting me to do right now to make a difference, whether it's within myself, within my family, beyond that, whatever it might be in that moment or that day. So that's something that's been on my mind a lot, especially over the last week.
And I think priorities we can look at that are tasks, but they're basically responsibilities. So priorities and responsibilities are pretty well the same thing. And for me, when I look at it as a responsibility, it puts it even deeper.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Well, especially after the last week, I can say that like my head hurt by the end of the week because I was checking stuff so much. So I think it was like Friday night, Brad and I looked at each other and we were like, I've had enough of listening to the TV. Like my head hurts. I've had enough of looking at the phone. Everything it is just kind of depressing, and it will bring you down. It'll bring your spirit down. And so we decided, it was like, I just kind of want to start maybe putting the television away, and maybe you and I just reading a book together, doing a study together. So we started doing that at night instead of just going and watching a show, because like Isaiah said, it is kind of silly just to go from your work day to your phone or whatever and the television. And so we started doing that, and like what it does for my heart, it's exciting. It gives you peace. It gives you, I don't know how to explain it, but it feels more fulfilling, and maybe that's the best way to put it. There's that. And then we've also decided, like this past Sunday, other than replying back to messages every now and then, no social media whatsoever. And so like it's just been nice to connect in a way different way, and it feels great. So I would encourage everybody to do that.
Yes, and something we do is we do some yoga in the evening. We take a walk after supper. We do some tapping. We play games. All of that kind of stuff. We have some relaxing music. We'll put on the TV. I don't know, ambiance, or is that what it's called, or whatever. Beautiful but relaxing music, and we have that on usually all day. But those are all great things that everybody's mentioned. So, I mean, those could even be considered our takeaways, but if you want, you can choose a takeaway.
I think, well, my takeaway is kind of like an action step of, like, I recommended making that list. And then, like Caitlin mentioned, taking it a step further and remembering that or consulting that list so that you're not just making it and setting it aside. I feel like that would be my main takeaway as kind of also an action step.
I would too, like I've been doing. I encourage you to replace those distractions with intentional habits because they are a whole lot more fulfilling.
I conjured up an analogy during this whole video, and it may not make sense, but I'm gonna say it anyway. Okay. You don't go to the grocery store without a list. Okay, well, some people do. Like, if I go to the grocery store without a list, it can be a really bad thing. So don't go to tech without a purpose. Like, if you're going to your phone, don't just go to it for no, certain reason. Just like the grocery store, I mean, in a way, it can be a good thing because, like, we'll go there and whatever's not on the list, like, I'll pick out, some snacks or what have you. But typically you want to go to the grocery store with a list so you know what you're getting, you know how long it's going to take, and you're not going to just fill up the cart. So I feel like going to tech, your phone, laptop, TV, whatever it is, like, go there with a purpose.
That would make a really great piece of apparel. Add that to the list. And I would say what I did for the longest time was I put a Post-it note on the back of my phone so that whenever I picked up my phone, I looked at it and read it and say, what am I going to use my phone for right now? And it makes you stop and think, okay, it's right there. And it works really great. It really does. So be that first kernel of popcorn. Even if those aren't around you, connect with us. We appreciate you and we are thankful for you. No one or person shall do life alone. So please do reach out, and we look forward to connecting with you, and take care.